Yo everyone, welcome to my predictions and breakdown of the entire UFC Fight Night Edwards vs Brady fight card. This card, guys, despite being a fight night, actually is somewhat stacked and has quite a few solid matchups to look out for. I've done my best here to put together some solid picks that I think will be pretty good for this fight night. Watch the whole video through to see how many underdogs I did end up picking on this card. But before we even get into this card, I want to talk quickly about the last card, which was UFC Fight Night Vettori vs Kutateladze 2. We did well on the last card overall in picks. I believe I got 8 out of 13 fights correct, even with all the upsets that were on the card, so I thought it was pretty good. We got almost every single confident pick correct too, which was cool. I didn't end up making a recap video of the event, so I just thought I would let you guys know a little bit about how I did on results. Also, I will be posting a full card betting guide video for this card later on this week, so make sure to keep an eye out for that video. If you want to know what my personal bets, locks of the card, solid favorites, and solid underdogs will be for this card. As always, I will be starting with the prelims and working my way all the way to the main event. Timestamps are in the description and the comment section below if you'd like to skip to any fight in particular. We're going to be starting with the first fight of the card, which is Guram Kutateladze versus Kaue Fernandes. This is a great first fight on the card. Guram Kutateladze was built up to be the next big thing at lightweight. He has beaten Mateusz Gamrot in his debut, but then he went on to lose a split decision to Damir Ismagulov and then lost by late rounds TKO to Elvis Brenner. I honestly don't think the Elvis Brenner loss is that bad, but it isn't the best loss to have. He has since bounced back and beat Jordan Vucenic, which is a great win in my opinion, another guy who's on this fight card, and he is still looking quite dangerous and solid all around as a fighter. Kaue Fernandes, I actually don't know why he is this much of an underdog, because he's actually quite decent and he can be really nasty as a finisher. The guy has 5 first round KO finishes and has some solid kicks to the body, the head, and the legs of his opponents. He can be taken down and controlled though by a solid grappler, which was shown in his fight against Mark Diakisi, which isn't a terrible loss either. I think I'd overall want to side with Guram Kutateladze because he just seems more well-rounded, more technical on the feet, but I'd look out for the odds on Kaue Fernandes by finish, because honestly, it could happen. The guy has a solid armbar finish on the ground, and like I mentioned earlier, he's got 5 first-round KO finishes as well. Guram Kutateladze will be the pick here, most likely by decision win or late rounds TKO. This is a close one though. Moving on to Caolan Loughran versus Nathan Fletcher, and no joke, when I first was researching these fighters, I was watching Caolan Loughran versus Jake Hadley, and I just couldn't help myself from thinking that Loughran looks like a mix between Drew Dober and that kid from Incredibles, the villain kid. You know who I'm talking about? Syndrome. He doesn't look like it too much but in his fight photo, but trust me, if you watch that fight and you watch how he's tucking his chin, I feel like he looks a lot like that kid. But let me know what you guys think. But to get back to talking about these fighters, I honestly think that Nathan Fletcher will be able to get this one done with his grappling. He is extremely talented on the ground. He does set up some great takedowns with his hands, which is great. I wish he did it all the time, but he seems to be having success regardless. And not a lot of people probably have been mentioning this, but Nathan Fletcher and Caolan Loughran versed each other on the amateur scene a while ago, and Nathan Fletcher was able to do great things in that fight with his grappling to win a pretty dominant decision win in that fight. And honestly, I have no idea how Caolan Loughran didn't get finished by triangle in that fight. It was pretty much sunken in, should have been a finish, but the guy is pretty tough. He is a little stiff in his overall game, especially in the stand-up, extremely stiff actually, not fluid at all, but he is a tough dude. Anyways, I can see the same result happening in this fight again. I'll be locking in Nathan Fletcher by submission or decision to get this one done. Moving on to Shauna Bannon versus Puja Tomar, and this fight is pretty much a pick'em fight to me. Regardless who I pick, just know that this will not be receiving an outright bet, and that most likely, like I say in almost every video, it might be a nice addition to a parlay in terms of going over 2.5 rounds or going to decision, since on average WMMA fights really do go to decision a lot. Puja Tomar is probably the better striker in this matchup, although I personally don't rate her very highly. I actually remember picking against her in her last UFC fight against Ryan dos Santos. It was a close fight, but I actually thought she lost that fight and received a robbery decision. This is all my opinion, of course. I don't rate her very highly, and on the other side of that coin, I have seen some solid stuff in terms of the grappling of Shauna Bannon. good BJJ from top and bottom position as well, and I honestly hope she grapples in this fight, because if she does, I can see a very easy win for her in the future if she can get this fight to the ground, maybe even a finish by sub. So I might end up changing that initial idea about putting this fight on a parlay to go to decision. But yeah, Shauna should be the more physical of the two. She's the larger fighter, more rangy. She should be able to have some success with her grappling. And in the BJJ against Puja Tomar, who doesn't really have a ground game as far as I know. She's got some trips and throws, but no actual ground game. So Shauna Bannon is the pick. Moving on to Andrey Pulyaev versus Christian Leroy Duncan. I will be picking Christian Leroy Duncan to win this fight. It's a pretty quick pick, I know, but I've watched enough fight tape to know that Christian Leroy Duncan can be quite the tough matchup, an overall tricky fighter to verse for a lot of guys, and to cop him in your UFC debut seems a little rough to me. Andrey Pulyaev, as far as what I've seen, is pretty solid overall, but where he stands out the most is in his kicking game. He's got very solid and hard leg and body kicks, which may give problems to Duncan if the fight stays at range, but I just think that Duncan will be able to end up closing the distance and use his grappling in this fight to get a finish, most likely in the later rounds by TKO. I really do see that happening, since Pulyaev didn't seem that good. And the guy, although he is 9-2, has had a lot of losses in his amateur career against a few fighters who are 0-0 as well, which is not really that good. Christian Leroy Duncan will be the pick here. Confident picks list addition as well. I think he wins by decision or late rounds TKO. Moving on to Marcin Tybura versus Mick Parkin. This is a very close matchup. It really is going to be whoever you prefer from a style perspective. Do you think Mick Parkin keeps this one on the feet and has success, or do you think that Tybura can take this to the ground and dominate? Those are the ways this fight will need to go for both guys. Tybura is the favorite, but I actually think that Mick Parkin might be the guy that has the better chance of winning this fight, and this is mostly due to the stand-up advantage he has over Tybura. But it's not just that, it's also the fact that he can grapple himself and has shown that he can get up and scramble in some bad positions on the ground. I think Mick should be able to keep this fight standing, and I honestly think he might be able to get a finish in this fight as well, if not a win by decision. I do think Tybura is the better grappler of the two, and I do think that Mick Parkin may be in quite a bit of trouble if this does go to the ground, but I do think he will be able to avoid the ground game and win this fight on the feet. Mick Parkin is the pick as an underdog. Moving on to Kavanaugh versus Felipe dos Santos, and I really wish that Kavanaugh wasn't this much of a favorite over Felipe dos Santos. I just believe it's not warranted at all. Don't get me wrong, the guy is really good, and what we've seen on the regional scene and on the Contender Series has been fantastic, but I just don't think he deserves this much of a favorite over a guy like Felipe dos Santos, who has been consistently versing higher level competition inside the UFC. He versed and lost to Manel Cap in his debut in a pretty good back and forth fight by decision, and then he lost to Andrey, another great prospect, by decision as well just recently. So Felipe can be really solid and perform well all around, and this does make him dangerous for a guy like Kavanaugh. I'd have the odds with Kavanaugh maybe being a -200 favorite. That's my personal opinion. I think he has the tools to win this fight and continue climbing in the UFC, but I do think this is going to be a close one if it does go to decision. And if it doesn't go to decision, it's because Kavanaugh got the KO. I will be picking Kavanaugh, but this one is not on the bets for me. At least Kavanaugh isn't. Solid striker with very good wrestling as well. Should be able to get this one done. Moving on to Herbert versus Padilla. This is a very, very close fight. Happy the odds mimic that by pretty much being a pick'em fight. Jai really has managed to fight a lot of top-level competition through and through, and although he doesn't always win, the man has made some top-level fighters have a hard time in the octagon. He took Fares Ziam to a decision, took Ludovic Klein to a draw, which is extremely impressive, beat Carl Nelson by decision, and of course, he dropped Topuria in their fight together before ultimately losing that fight. The guy is a solid fighter for sure, no doubts about it. Padilla, although the guy hasn't been versing the same level of competition, has shown to be a finisher through and through as well. Currently on a 5-fight finish streak, very dangerous hands, very dangerous grappling game, showcased already he's a solid all-round MMA fighter. I do worry if it is enough against Herbert though, but I do like the fact that he is very quick and he looks fast when he shoots his takedowns and secures the takedowns. Seems to catch a few guys off guard with that. I think the type of fight that this fight will most likely be might favor Chris Padilla a little more, since I think he navigates the clinch and the pocket range a little better than Jai Herbert. The reason I say that is because Jai does well at a range, and he is a rangy dude, but he can get scrappy and does fight a good amount of the time in short and mid-range in the striking, and I do see him get cracked a little bit in there as well. Chris Padilla is a decent counter-striker and has nasty elbows in the clinch, like the one he caught Rongju with right on his eye. I think he might edge this one out as the slight underdog, but this fight could honestly go either way. I think if this does go to decision and Padilla can't get the takedown, there is a good chance that Jai Herbert wins this fight. But if Padilla is securing the takedown or hurts Jai Herbert, I think he wins this fight by finish a lot of the time, or even gets a dominant grappling decision win. Chris Padilla is the pick as the underdog. Moving on to the main card now. Nathaniel Wood versus Morgan Charriere. Close fight, very close fight we have here. Honestly, Nathaniel Wood is a great fighter, very underrated and an unknown dude for a lot of UFC fans. But if you follow the sport a bit more seriously, you know the guy has been around for a long time and has been performing quite well in a lot of his fights. Beaten a lot of top guys like John Castaneda, Charles Rosa, Charles Jourdain, and Andre Fili. And now he's coming up against a guy with a lot of momentum in Morgan Charriere, who's won 4 out of his last 5 fights. Went to a split decision against Chepe Mariscal. Very impressive. And Chepe will be getting a ranked opponent very soon. The guy's extremely impressive. And he has been finishing a lot of guys, not just by KO, but by body shot KO, which is always great to see, since it's easier to finish some tough guys by investing in the body. My opinion of this matchup is that Nathaniel Wood might edge it for me in terms of being the more technical striker and the better striker overall, very slightly. It's very close, but I'd give him that edge in this matchup. But Morgan Charriere is the more dangerous of the two by far. He can grapple very well too. He's got slick takedowns. The guy's extremely physical. He's got a granite chin, and I don't see Nathaniel Wood being able to hurt him in this fight. He can only win this fight by decision, in my opinion, and by being able to outpoint Charriere on the outside. But I can just see Charriere doing more damage overall in this fight, potentially relying on his grappling too, and just getting the better of the exchanges, especially if it gets dirty and they fight in the pocket. Morgan Charriere is the pick here, but I wouldn't fully count out Nathaniel Wood. Moving on to Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan. Now, this is going to be my only quick pick for the main card, and my only confident picks list addition for the main card as well. I think Jordan Vucenic, as far as what it seems to me, is pretty much like a better version of Chris Duncan. They both have similar games, but I think Vucenic is by far the better striker of the two, the more dangerous striker as well. I think Vucenic is the better submission grappler of the two as well. I think he snatches up submissions better. I see Vucenic winning this one pretty clearly, either by dominant decision victory or by finish, by KO, or maybe like a guillotine or a rear naked choke when he's got him hurt, or when he decides to shoot in a little poorly. Vucenic had a pretty good showing against Guram Kutateladze, where Guram had to rely a bit on the grappling in order to come back in that fight after being outstruck and rocked on the feet in the first round. So Vucenic is the pick here. I'd be pretty surprised to see him get outpaced and out-wrestled massively in this fight. It's always a possibility, but I just think it's unlikely. Moving on to Molly McCann versus Alexia Thainara. Now, a little info on this fight. Molly McCann, as you can see, is the underdog going into this fight, but she was scheduled to fight Estela Nunes, I believe, and now that fight has been replaced with this fight with Alexia Thainara as the new opponent. Alexia is taking this fight on roughly a week and a half's notice. Never fighting in the UFC before, won her first fight on the Contender Series where she was able to get a clear victory over Rose Canseco. And I'm just going to flat out say it. Am I the only one that thinks Molly McCann is just the flat out better fighter in almost every way in this matchup, especially in terms of the technical striking? Please let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, but I just think she is super solid. Her striking technique is quite solid. She can rely on her grappling if she needs it, and she is quite physical. I think she's quite the step up in competition for Alexia Thainara. And although she clearly won on her Contender Series fight and has an impressive record, she has looked quite a little unpolished and sloppy in my opinion, and she likes to brawl a little too. Pretty confident pick in Molly McCann here, but I don't know if I want to put it in my confident picks list as an addition, because a brawl type fight can be a little bit unpredictable if it does happen. Locking in Molly McCann as the pick for this fight, most likely by TKO or decision. Moving on to Kevin Holland versus Gunnar Nelson. Now, this is an interesting fight, and this fight's really going to be a massive confirmation of my love for underdogs, but I really truly only pick underdogs if I feel like they're going to win. But basically, as you can see by the odds. Kevin Holland is a slight underdog in this matchup, and I can somewhat agree with the odds since you've seen Kevin be taken down a lot recently in his fights, especially in his most recent fight with Reiner de Ridder, been submitted as well a few times, and Gunnar Nelson is very good on the ground and with his grappling overall. It isn't looking good for Holland here, but then I remember something, guys. I search his record and his fight tape, and a lot of these losses do come in the middleweight division, and I've never once thought that Kevin Holland should be a middleweight fighter. He's always looked small in there. He seems to get outmuscled by big middleweights, not just middleweights. He's usually fighting big middleweights as well, so I think the move to welterweight will be best for him, and he's done his best work here in the past. He's not undefeated in the welterweight division by no means, but those losses are usually to very tough, high-level opponents like Jack Della Maddalena and MVP. I think Kevin won't be as easily outmuscled in this matchup as he was when he versed Reiner de Ridder. Reiner's super big, and I think he will be able to keep this fight on the feet for the most part and do solid work on the feet versus Gunnar Nelson. I also know that Kevin has struggled in the past with karate fighters like Wonderboy and like MVP. Gunnar is a karate stance fighter as well, but Gunnar Nelson is nowhere near the level of Wonderboy and MVP, and he has been inactive for 2 years now. I just see Kevin doing solid work here in this fight on the feet. That's my pick. We can move on to the co-main event of the card now, Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. And can I just say that I love Jan Blachowicz. He seems like a super nice guy. He's been able to achieve a lot in this sport, even at his current age. But tough matchup he's got ahead of himself with Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg on a 7-fight win streak he's on, coming off a close fight with Volkan Oezdemir. Don't get me wrong, I think he won that fight, but I also think it was a lot closer than I originally thought, and I think it shows Ulberg's current level pretty well. Very similar fighter to Adesanya and Pereira, great left hook, tends to fight on the outside, doesn't usually press the action. Jan Blachowicz, on the other hand, has been very inactive, been out for around a year and a half, contemplated retiring, I believe, due to 2 massive shoulder surgeries he had due to injury, and is now back to fight Carlos Ulberg and says he wants a potential rematch with Pereira down the line. Jan is still a solid striker though, and has the option to take the fight to the ground. He's showcased this in fights before, like in his fight with Alex Pereira, where he was able to secure quite a bit of control time. If you're asking me my opinion on this fight, guys, and why wouldn't you, because you're watching this video, of course, that's why you're here, but although Ulberg has everything on his side right now, and he's young, he's got momentum, he's been active, I just think that Jan actually has showcased in his career that he has the skills to pay the bills, and I think Jan is way better than Volkan Oezdemir. I also think Jan's striking is fantastic. He was able to do well against Pereira. He was crushing Magomed Ankalaev's legs, really did a number on him on the feet, was able to do well against Alexander Rakic, and this all isn't including the fact that he was able to outstrike Adesanya a while ago on the feet and look fantastic in that fight, mixing in the grappling as well. The guy's extremely underrated. He's not only got the striking skills, he has the Polish power to back it up. If he is truly in solid fight shape and the injuries aren't plaguing him badly anymore, I could see him outstriking and flat out beating Carlos Ulberg on the feet and in the grappling. Everything is against him, and he is a sizable underdog here, but I just can't shake the feeling of him winning this fight just because I think Carlos Ulberg hasn't proven himself at this level. And I just think Jan is battle-tested and proven to be championship material. I think he pulls off an upset at his age, and maybe if this was a lighter weight class, I'd favor Ulberg more so. But age isn't as important as when you're talking about light heavyweight and heavyweight division. Going with the underdog Jan Blachowicz as a pick here, I don't think many people will be going with Jan Blachowicz. But I do truly think this will be a very close fight. I doubt a lot of people are picking Jan. I'd like to see the picks in the newest prediction tracker video. Moving on now to the last fight of the card and the main event of the evening, Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. This is a super interesting fight. Really excited to see how this one plays out. This one has to be a tough one to make a pick on, just because both fighters have a solid chance to win and a way to win this fight. I was surprised initially seeing Leon Edwards as a slight underdog going into this fight, since both fighters have lost to Bilal Muhammad, but Leon Edwards has proven himself more, in my opinion, by beating tougher competition, especially those with a wrestling background like Kamaru Usman twice and Colby Covington. But then again, Brady and Belal fought quite similar in terms of being guys that use their striking to set up the takedown, and they both have fantastic forward pressure with great cardio and pace. I can see the reasoning in the odd makers choosing Brady just due to the heavy similarity to Belal and Leon's most recent loss to Belal. But to talk about the two fighters a little, if there are new listeners listening and they don't know too much about both these fighters, Leon Edwards, former champion, only recently lost his belt to the current champion Belal Muhammad in his most recent fight and lost. Fantastic stand-up striker with great technique, but he has also showcased his own offensive and defensive grappling game and is more of a well-rounded fighter than just a striker. Sean Brady, currently coming off a dominant decision win over Gilbert Burns, is a predominant grappler who, like I mentioned earlier, sets up his takedowns with his striking and likes to pressure forward most of the time. His striking has improved a lot, and he has managed to look pretty solid everywhere the fight can be taken. He's also not just a wrestler, and when he does take this fight to the ground, he will look for a variety of submissions as well. Sean Brady's only loss is by TKO to the current champion in Belal Muhammad, so no shame in that. This is a pretty close fight, super close fight to pick. Like I usually say for a lot of close fights, there is two main lines I see this fight going the majority of the time. Sean Brady will either be able to do the exact same thing as Belal Muhammad did in his fight with Leon Edwards, which is to keep a great 5-round pace, implement the striking while mixing in the wrestling, and grind out a decision victory over Leon Edwards, or Leon Edwards is able to stuff all the takedowns, just out-scramble Sean Brady in some grappling exchanges, and piece him up on the feet with his superior striking game and great footwork. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm pretty certain I'll be staying away from this fight in terms of betting on it. It just feels a little too close to make a rock-solid bet or prediction on. I think I will be slightly leaning a little bit towards Leon Edwards here as an underdog pick, and a few reasons for that. He's the better striker, he's got some great grappling skills with solid takedown defense, and one of the reasons I want to side with him is that he's just so solid when he gets going. If he just throws output in this striking and is a bit more aggressive, I can truly see him beating anyone in the division, and I honestly think there were moments where if he took advantage of, he could have beaten Belal as well in their fight. I also think that although Sean Brady fights similarly to Belal Muhammad, very similarly, they are not the same in terms of two main factors, and one factor that is an advantage for Brady is his BJJ and submission game. But the other factor, which I think will play a bigger role in this matchup, is that he doesn't press forward all the time like Belal. I watched back a lot of his fight tape, and there is a lot of moments in the first rounds of fights and in the championship rounds of fights where Brady slows down and is happy fighting at range. And I think if he gets a little too comfortable doing that with Leon, that's where he can lose a lot of moments in this fight and potentially get hurt by Leon as well. I also think that he doesn't time his takedowns as well as Belal Muhammad, and he does prefer to clinch up against the cage a lot more often than actually secure the takedown, and Leon Edwards seems to do quite well moving away from that clinch and even doing damage in the clinch position. I do believe though that his striking is a little cleaner and more technical than Belal Muhammad's, and this was confirmed somewhat since Sean Brady was able to outstrike Belal in the first round of their fight pretty consistently before getting pressured and finished in the second round. In the end, to stop myself from rambling on too much about this close fight, I think the fight will most likely go to decision. I can see Leon edging a decision win 48-47 over Sean Brady in a relatively close fight round by round. I just think he won't get taken down and held down for as long in this fight. Could happen, but I just don't think it's the most likely scenario. The last time I went for a main event and co-main event double underdog pick, it didn't go very well, so we shall see how this event plays out. That's it for my main card pick, guys, and that's it for my full card predictions and breakdown for UFC Fight Night Edwards vs Brady. If you guys have any thoughts or questions for me regarding the card, feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to respond to every single comment left in the comment section below. Thanks for watching and see you guys next time.